All right, we're entitling the lesson tonight, Multiplying Our Results. Multiplying, it doesn't come from James. It comes from one of the passages I include in our study tonight from the Old Testament, Leviticus. But from that, we learn something that's good for Christians in the church world to know. And so we're going to get into it. I'm not going to spend much time on the review since we're not going to take near as long tonight. The main point of the Sunday morning message was if you're going to be judging other people, get ready for God to judge you. He's going to judge you the way you judge others. And if you're a Christian, that judgment will be in the form of a woodshed. Not hell, a woodshed. And so we talked about that Sunday morning and talked about how many times Christians want to get the speck, deal with the speck or the little problem in their neighbor. Well, they got a huge problem or a log in their eye themselves. And we shared my opinion of what that log is. Because Jesus said if you get that log out of your eye, then you'll see clearly to get the speck out of your neighbor's eye. So what has to happen when you're dealing with your neighbor? You can't see what your neighbor needs until you quit being judgmental. And so that was the idea. In my mind, that's the log in the eye or the beam in the eye, depending what translation you happen to be reading. All right, now, multiplying our results. Tonight, James chapter 5, verses 11, 12, and 13. Verse 11, Behold, we count them happy which endure. Now, and again, verse 10, where we ended Sunday morning, Take my brethren the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and patience. So he's saying a lot of godly men, whether they were prophets in the Old Testament, he could have went so far as to say the apostles in the New Testament, they suffered a lot because of speaking up for God. And right now there are countries, Christians in Afghanistan aren't out testifying on the street corners to win people to Jesus. They would be immediately put to death by the Taliban if they did that. Any witnessing they do is behind the scenes, trying not to be caught. They would call that blasphemy and kill the Christian. They'll kill the Christian if they catch him anyway. But if you're out on the street preaching, they're going to catch you. And sometimes in the New Testament, disciples, apostles, preachers knew that and did it anyway, and sure enough, they were martyred for their faith. Peter said we ought to obey God rather than man. So he ended by saying, if you want an example of suffering, affliction, look at the Old Testament prophets. That was the last verse of Sunday morning, verse 10. Now the first verse, verse 11 of tonight, we count them happy which endure. You that hang in there. He said, behold, we count them happy which endure. They don't give up. They hang in there. You have heard of the patience of Job and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. That's right, Job came out well at the end, if you look at it a certain way. If you look at it on the ongoing trial basis, he lost all of his children but one. He lost all of his livestock and the people who tended to them except one person. There's always one left to go tell Job what was happening. Pretty soon it was just him and the ones that were in charge of various things that survived the catastrophe. Can you imagine losing a bunch of children? He did. Now, The end of the Lord was that God restored everything. He had many more children, many more livestock, more than he had before the trial. But it's wonderful that you got more kids, but you can't replace the kids that die. So it's a semi-happy ending. I guess once you've lost all your kids and your livestock, which is your fortune, when you get more kids to love on and you get more livestock to make a living on, you could call that a happy ending. But man, did some people die in the temptation that Satan threw at Job. So, yet he hung in there. Remember, Job had no Bible. The book of Job is the first Bible book that was written, which means Job had no Bible. Chronologically, Job was the first book in the Bible written. All he knew was what God might tell him from time to time. Abraham had no Bible. He might have had Job, but we know he didn't have anything else because Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and he wasn't born yet. So everything Abraham heard about God, God told him. So there's been a lot of interesting stories, and you hang in there, and you go with what you do know. So he said, you've heard of the patience of Job, and when you're in the middle of the storm, it doesn't feel like the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. But in Job's case, the pitifulness and the tender mercy came after the trial, when God restored everything. Matthew 5:10. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. There's a book. It's been out forever. I got a hold of one. I never owned one, but somewhere I got a hold of one. I don't know if I borrowed them. I read parts of it. It's called Fox's Book of Martyrs. And it's stories of people who have died for the faith over the centuries. A lot of people paid the supreme price. I believe personally that they're going to get a great reward in heaven, for no greater love is any man than to lay down his life for a friend. So when people lay down their life for that friend, God himself, I'm just sure they're going to get a special crown. There are different crowns that will be given in heaven, and a martyr's crown is going to be an amazing crown. But what a price in this life. I think every one of us, if you backed us in a corner, know that the minute I breathe, the second I breathe my last tear, I'm in heaven. Not 10 minutes later, not an hour later. The minute my spirit leaves my body, and the body is not dead till my spirit goes, as the body without the spirit is dead. James wrote earlier. Even though we know that whatever kills us, a disease, old age, car wreck, vandalism, being murdered, whatever kills us, we get the last laugh because we open our eyes instantly in heaven. Not the same eyes. The same eyes are in the casket. But what I'm telling you is the new creation of God instantly is in heaven and sees everything that God has prepared for them. So that's the good news. Yet we worry because we're used to this stuff. And so we wrap ourselves around this stuff and try to hold on to it. But the Bible said, blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Blessed here is part of the Beatitudes. And got a whole bunch of blesseds, and that's one of them. And again here, what is the blessing Jesus pronounces upon those which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, and they go to heaven? All right, let's flip that over. Verse 12. But above all things, my brethren, swear not. Now this is important to James. It was important to God too, because God mentioned something similar in the Old Testament. Above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath. But let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest you fall into condemnation. He's saying, don't make oath to God. Because God doesn't take kindly when you make an oath to God and break it. Again, there are a lot of people who want to promise God stuff. You know the problem with that? There is absolutely no power in your promise. You can go up in front of the church, kneel at an altar, and cry your eyes out and say, God, I'm going to do better next week. I promise. No power there. The power to get better next week is to believe God's promise. That's where the power is, in the promises of God. So we need to remember those things. But what is he primarily saying when he's saying such a thing as don't make oath? What he's saying is, he concludes there with this thought: just mean what you say. That's all. Quit with all the promises in the oath. Mean what you say. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. That's it. If you train people that when you say it, it's going to get done, they won't have to say, do you promise? Because you've proven that your word is something you will keep. So James said, it's get away from, you have no control of heaven, you have no control of earth, so why in the world are you making oath on heaven or the earth? You have no control over that. He said, just wise up, say what you mean. Isn't that more simple? Just say what you mean to people. So that's an interesting verse, and again, Jesus, the Old Testament talks about that. Maybe it's Jesus. I'm going to have to research that and think about it. Oh, yeah, it is Jesus. Right underneath there, Matthew 5:34 and 5. Jesus said, but I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. So Jesus said the same thing that James is saying. James, most people believe this James is the half-brother of Jesus. Someone who grew up with Jesus. Someone who didn't believe Jesus was God until he resurrected. I mean, if you had a brother or a sister tell you they're God, would you believe them? So, I believe the only one in the family that believed them, there were two until stepdad died, Joseph, who was James' real dad. Until those two seen the thing happen at the beginning. They believed who Jesus was. But the siblings undoubtedly did not. I personally believe, though it's not covered in the Gospels, that after his resurrection, Jesus went and talked to his family. And now James not only becomes a preacher, but he becomes the pastor of the Jerusalem church. Peter the apostle was afraid of disappointing him. You say, how do you know that? He was visiting a Gentile city to visit with Paul, and he was eating with the Gentiles, just like Paul ate with the Gentiles. And word came to him that two men that James sent to check on them to see how they're doing were in town looking for him. Peter was afraid of what James would think, seeing him fellowshipping with the non-Jews. So he separated himself from them. Paul rebuked him. You know, it amazes me. The Catholics say Peter's the Pope. He was afraid of James, and he got rebuked by Paul. I don't read of many rebukes to popes in the world. They pretty much do whatever they want in the Catholic Church. But nonetheless, James is saying there what Jesus said, and I don't think he personally heard Jesus say it, because I don't believe this. The brother of John, the son of Zebedee, was beheaded. James, in other words, John's brother, was beheaded in prison, in jail when he and Peter got arrested. Peter was delivered by an angel the next night. But the James we're most famous with, that's not this James. So I think the general consensus is he's the half-brother of Jesus. So the bottom line, say what you mean what you say. Verse 13, is any among you afflicted? You see underneath there, the English, I forget the translation, ESV, exactly what it means right now, but the modern translation is anyone among you suffering. So in the King James, is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is he merry? Let him sing psalms. So if something's going on in your life, pray. It can be sickness. It can be discouragement. It can be a lot of things. If something is afflicting you. The next verse that we won't get to till Sunday morning is any among you sick. So this afflicted here isn't dealing with sickness. That'll be dealt with in the next verse. But any kind of difficulty. So, again, the Thayer's Greek dictionary said it means to suffer or endure evils, which would be hardships and troubles. Jesus, in the last verse of John 16, I have told you these things so that you can have peace in me. In this world you'll have trouble, but be brave, I have defeated the world. So Jesus said, get used to it. In this world you're going to have trouble, but I don't want you to succumb to discouragement, he's in essence saying. I've overcome the world. What's that mean? How'd he overcome the world? The world killed him. So what do you mean by that, I've overcome the world? What he means, I win. I've already won your salvation. In his mind, I mean, he hadn't been crucified when he said that yet, but I'm about to win your salvation. I'm about to take the keys of death, hell, and the grave from Satan. I win. So if I win and you're in me, you win. It's not going to look like I'm winning when I'm on a cross. And it won't look like you're winning sometimes. But Jesus said, cheer up. No matter how it looks, if you're in me, you win. There'll be days you don't feel like you're winning. But Jesus said, be of good cheer. You win. Winning football teams aren't always ahead the entire game. Sometimes they get 33 points behind at halftime. They're not always ahead the whole game. But they keep going after it. And once in a while they catch up and win. So Jesus said, whatever the world throws at you, you hang in there. All right, now, here's what I want to get into. What did James tell us to do about trouble? Pray, ask God for help in your troubles, and hopefully remove them, asking God to hopefully remove them from you, the particular trouble you're going through. Look at Matthew 18:19 in the easy-to-read version. To say it another way, if two of you on earth agree in anything you pray for, my Father in heaven will do what you ask. I wonder how often people claim that. That's the creative word of Almighty God. And it's going to get better in a second. We shouldn't read these things and quote them and never think about it. Jesus said there's a reality, if you walk in it, where if any two of you agree on what you're praying for, Father in heaven is going to do it. We read it and go on to the next verse. We got to get better at going, God, I do believe that verse, help thou mine unbelief. He didn't put it in there to fill up space. He said it for a reason. And He's God, and God cannot lie. So He meant it. But now I want to show you something where I got my title. So He's saying to agree. He's saying the agreement of two in prayer is more powerful than one praying. The agreement, or let me put it this way, the unity of two in prayer is more powerful. Let me read you something in Leviticus. You know, I'm into math. I'm not sure that's what you call this, but I'm into math. Leviticus 26:8. Third book in the Old Testament, Leviticus. Here's what God said. And 5 of you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you, 5 of you that are doing war, 5 shall chase 100. 5 of you, I'm on your side in this battle. 5 of you are going to put 100 of the enemy to flight. Sound pretty good, right? 100 of you shall put 10,000 to flight. Wait. Do the math here. 100 is 20 times 5. 5 shall chase 100. 20 times 100 is 2,000. But He said, 100 of you shall chase 5,000. Not 2. Again, you would think if there's 5 guys here and they're chasing 100, and another 5 guys here chasing 100, and you got until you get 25s and they're all chasing 100, you'd come up with 2,000. But God said that 100 is going to chase, is it 5,000? 10,000. Yeah, that 100 is going to chase 10,000. All right, so you're increasing the amount of unity from 5 to 100. You're increasing the unity. Think of the 2 men agreeing in prayer. The unity. You're now going from 5 people in agreement to 100 people in agreement. But instead of getting 20 times the result, you're getting 100 times the result. 10,000. You say, what are you getting at? Bob Strebel once said when he was preaching on this verse, when we add the unity, God multiplies the results. When we do addition, God does multiplication. 120 people went up in a row to pray after Jesus ascended to heaven. 120. Before the day was over, 3,000 men besides women and children were added to the Christian community. You know, when you read this stuff, you understand there's a reason God said, love each other the way I love you. There's results in that. When we quit fighting and start agreeing on stuff, just two of us agreeing can get a prayer answered. "120 people in an upper room praying. Doors closed. Suddenly there's a mighty rushing wind. This wind is loud enough where Jerusalem hears it. And thousands come to check it out. Imagine, I want you to let your imagination run for a minute. Imagine if God became the head of our promotion. The head of the promotion community at Walk of Grace. He was the head of the of promotion for that 120 to grow into a church overnight. I was talking to Barbie yesterday, I believe. Might have been this afternoon before I went to work. I don't know, when she was home. I don't remember. One of the two. About a song I wrote, and I haven't sung in a long time. You might think that Walk of Grace can never ever really grow. There were troubles behind, there'll be troubles ahead. We would need the east wind to blow. What I mean by that, when Moses stretched forth the rod, when they were trapped between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army, the east wind blew, and it divided the waters and formed dry ground. So I said, you might think that Walk of Grace can never ever really grow. There were troubles behind, there'll be troubles ahead. We would need the east wind to blow. But whatsoever you desire when you pray, if you believe. Jesus had some really good news. He said you would receive. He said, whatsoever things you pray when you believe, you shall receive. I gave up on that song a long time ago. I thought, God, forgive me for giving up on prayer. Forgive me for giving up on prayer. In the afternoon, if it was indeed the afternoon, I think it was when they all come out speaking in tongues, and when they all come out of that upper room, 120 grew to thousands. All because God did that. And when He did that, it made noise. How many ever been outside in heavy wind? I've never been in a tornado, but I can't imagine the sound of a tornado. It would get your attention. God blew, the church grew. Boy, there's a song title. God blew and the church grew. My point is, sometimes when we don't get it, we quit believing for it. God said, Abraham, you're going to have a special baby. That special baby came 25 years later. Not 9 months later, not a year later, not 2 years later. He got that promise at 75, and he fathered that baby at 100. The father of our faith didn't quit. Once in a while, he had to get his faith fine-tuned again, and God was always faithful to do it. 25 years, God kept quickening him, and don't you quit on me. Don't you quit on me, Abraham. It's coming. If we don't, we're in America. If we pray on Wednesday and on Sunday and it's not done by Wednesday, we think God's not answering. For the first time, when that song hit me, probably listening to it at work on my phone, when it hit me, I said, God, forgive me for quitting. Maybe God just wants to show off. Wait until it's absolutely hopeless by all human observance, so He can get the glory. We already have one woman, she couldn't make it Sunday because family showed up. With that new couple coming, first week they were here, they told Barb, I see this building full. I mean, it's not exactly a big building, and it's only got 30 seats in it. Well, not even that, does it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 times 4. Well, yeah, it's got over 30. But right now, I'd take this being full, wouldn't you? So my challenge to you is, let's start agreeing in prayer. Jesus said just 2 of you agree. In my name, if 2 of you agree in my name, my Father will do it. I wonder if Jesus meant that.